Brian McClinton, Undersecretary, Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Just would like to welcome everyone here to the first technical committee meeting. I just wanted to say a few things to the technical committee to tell them sort of what happened and where we got. In a minute, you're going to hear from the Louisiana Outdoor Coalition. They're the NGOs that have been sort of behind this and pushing this along. So they're going to get sort of more of the meat potatoes. I'm just going to tell you a little bit over where we are now. So a bill's been passed. There's $10 million in the statutory dedicated funding within the conservation fund that we've been tasked to seek grant applications, letters of intent, and then review applications to put projects on the ground to utilize this money to really benefit the state of Louisiana. And so your position here is to develop that criteria. One, what it's going to be for the letter of intent, and then two, how to grade these things for applications. And basically, this is just to let the grantees know what y'all are seeking whenever to make the most competitive project possible. So the project selection committee met last week before last, and basically provided some recommendations. I think it's included in your package at the back. We discussed should there be minimum or maximum grant amounts. That was decided no. Should there be limitations on match? And it seemed like everybody wanted to kind of see what applicants we got or what letters of intent we got to get an idea of what demand is out there. So from there, they're asked, how can you define conservation? So that's going to be something that y'all get to tackle. And as the technical committee establishing these criteria, y'all are really the crux of what these grant applications are going to look like. So with that, I will just say thank you for your time, your service. If there's anything we could do, we're trying to get this, I guess talk about the timeliness of this. We're trying to get something done this year before session. We're trying to see if we can get a round of grants approved, understanding that conservation grants come in different cycles at different times of the year. We know we may not get the full 10 million obligated, but that's fine too. If we can get a round of grants, if there's some shovel-ready projects that y'all deem are worth being pushed up to the project selection board, then we'll see if we can get these things awarded prior to the fiscal session that's starting in April. And hopefully by seeing the number of applicants, the type of applications we have, and the type of projects that we can approve, that inspires the legislators to want to keep this program not just one $10 million, but keep it something funded into the future. So I know there's also this is a technical committee, so it's supposed to be just conversations. I will apologize about the awkwardness of the room because this is a public meeting, and so it is being broadcast. We have to have everyone by their microphones. So I know it's a little bit of a bad Seinfeld episode, everybody talking and looking up and down at each other. But so please keep any comments, this microphone on the public. And that's the reason why you're sitting at the table in a line instead of having a conversation looking at each other. So apologize about the technical difficulties, but really appreciate your time and you being here today. Thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead and take roll. Adam Eidman.
Present.
Brandon Veras. Cheston Hill.
Present.
Darren Phillips. Amy Frew. Sarah Krupa.
Present.
Scott Longman.
Present.
Brian Lazina.
Here.
All right, go ahead and welcome the coalition to their presentation.
I apologize for my distraction. Glad to present to the board today in your first meeting. My name is Joey Brew with the Department of Ag and Forestry's Office of Soil and Water Conservation, longtime conservation employee there. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the origins of the meetings and common sentiment across a pretty diverse group of agencies and NGOs that led us to where we are today, finally. Something that many of us have been working at for literal decades and never thought we'd see the day. Met some really frustrating moments and disheartening times, but lo and behold, here we are. And that original group is still in place. The State Conservation Fund Steering Committee, I guess we'd call ourselves, has been together for 5 years. And again, with the common interest of trying to find a way to get this very thing done. Seeing the amount, the magnitude of the federal dollars that were bypassing us, whether it be through farmland protection programs, conservation easements, looking at the huge, tremendous backlog of Farm Bill Conservation Program applications of eligible applicants that simply went unfunded for lack of leverage of federal funds to come in to get these things done. Whether conservation easements such as WRP and CRP type tracks that we're all familiar with that do lots of great things in the name of hydrologic restoration and habitat enhancements. Working land conservation programs where farmlands are protected to conversion of other more intense uses that derive less of an offsite public benefit. And the simple on-farm, case-by-case conservation plans that a lot of the soil and water conservation districts that I work with have been doing since the 30s, writing conservation plans, a non-binding agreement with individual landowners to face up and understand the conservation needs on their farms that are in line with their land use production practices, proving that conservation can go hand in hand with production and is key to sustaining it, obviously. And that private land stewardship is what builds the very conservation principles that exist between the USDA and the local soil and water conservation districts and the state conservation agencies. And one of the biggest challenges I think that exists within this longstanding program is gaining or delivering, I say, in addition to the conservation that gets you what we've referred to as the conservation benefits of SWAPA, soil, water, air, plants, animals, and energy. There's an E on that now, is outreach. How well do not only the public, but our other potential conservation partners understand the offsite public benefits of private lands conservation? And it's obvious to me that that's growing now. And this original group that came together to talk about this, beginning about 5 or 6 years ago, ebbed and flowed. A lot was done, meeting weekly. We met pretty darn often for a while there, at a minimum monthly. And little by little, as diverse a group as we were, came to a lot of common ground and led to the development of the House Concurrent Resolution, I believe it was about a year or so ago, that put together the Conservation Funding Study Group. And again, that same initial group, that steering committee was on, or for the most part, members of this entity that little by little, with Representative Jerome Zarang's hard work, led us to where we are now. And you were handed a flyer. I think you have copies of this. And I guess it gives a pretty accurate timeline and substantiates the benefit of what state conservation funding can do and the kinds of funds that it can leverage. The ag industry at 6.4 billion, there's a lot of farms that would be in a lot worse shape than they are now if it weren't for the sustainability, the on-farm sustainability and the soil health benefits provided by these conservation practices that have been standardized for many, many years now in the NRCS Field Office Technical Guide. It's not just a whim. It's scientifically proven these conservation methods work. And those conservation standards are a big reason why our ag economy is what it is. From that, or at least as a part of that, the outdoor recreation potential, the financial, the economic impact of those enterprises are just tremendous and listed there as well. House Bill 762, what became the recent act that put us all here, you see the conservation benefits there. And I would like to say that support working farms and forests could be added. You just can't throw all the text that you want into a little flyer like this. Support conservation implementation on working farms and forests. That way, we're not losing sight of the fact that the conservation on those working farms and forests is getting us soil health benefits, floodplain management, air quality, water quality improvements, wildlife habitat, that sort of thing. And then on the next page, down toward the bottom, you can see the breadth of the partnership that was in place. Substantiated, I guess, largely contributed to by NGOs without whom we wouldn't be where they are, because every time it seemed as though we weren't going to get where we needed, they're the ones who righted the ship and kept it moving forward. So thanks to everyone that you see, all the logos that you see here at the bottom of page 2 on this flyer. And I guess I've said enough, at least from a state conservation agency perspective. Thank you for doing what you do, for being on this board. And just know that this steering committee is not going anywhere. They've been here for the past 5 years doing everything that they could to help lead to the effort that we're part of now. And a lot of work's been done, a lot of hurdles have been overcome, and they'll remain in place to make sure that we don't run into those hurdles again and help in any way that they can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bro. My name is Ray Herndon. I work for a nonprofit conservation organization called the Conservation Fund. I'm based over in St. Tammany Parish. We're a national organization, but work across the state of Louisiana myself. I also want to recognize Emily Buxton, who is also here with another NGO, the Nature Conservancy. As Mr. Bro mentioned, some 5 years or so back, a group of individuals met right here in this room to talk about this possibility, which you guys are here to try and implement now. We kind of had this conversation about, and Mr. Bro touched on it, but various other Southeast states has had these programs that were distributing stateside funding for land protection to meet outdoor public recreation needs, to improve drinking water quality, to achieve some of the things on private lands to maintain those economic bases across individual states. So we happen to ultimately be surrounded by Texas, Arkansas, and just recently Mississippi and other southeastern states that were putting their dollars into these outcomes. And what happens when states sort of step into that arrangement is they are able to leverage considerable federal dollars, which otherwise go to other states across the country. So we're now in a situation here in Louisiana where we have, through the good work that has transpired over this 5 years, where we actually have some stateside funding where we can indeed leverage other funding sources and implement conservation outcomes for the benefits to the public. So there was a group that came together and, put this thought out and ultimately implemented a number of tasks along the way. We went out and did polling. We went out and tested language to also go out and look at those other states to see how they were setting up their stateside funding system. And is there something we could learn from them? So kind of going through and analyzing all these other, state programs to define, if you will, how we might contemplate a program here in the state of Louisiana. And as Mr. Bro alluded, the House concurrent resolution allowed the study group to continue that work forward. Now we've got legislation and actual funding. So this group that is comprised of the steering, what we call the steering committee, just because, we want to be involved, we want to be present, is comprised of both nonprofits, NGOs, and other agencies, both state, NRCS, federal, as well as other agencies that just come together to really, at this point in time, seek ways to support you all in making your decisions and understanding, what other states have done and what are the advantages and disadvantages of making a recommendation in any direction. So we will stay, as an active part of this conversation, the technical advisory board conversations. And we look forward to engaging with you, looking at projects, maybe providing some professional input to the process where there are questions relevant to other programs, et cetera. So we thank you for the opportunity. We thank you for convening today and look forward to the work ahead. Thank you.
Should we have adopted the agenda? Well, should we?
I'll make a motion that we approve the September 6, 2022 agenda.
I second.
Any discussion or objection? All right, then it's adopted. Approved. I think we do need a chair.
Yeah.
Or a facilitator at least.
Whether we rotate or have an honorary, somebody to spearhead the meeting, title on there.
Somebody's got to herd cats.
Yeah, yeah. So,
All right, I will,
probably keep us all in line, but somebody to,
We will entertain nominations for chair facilitator.
nominate Scott Long.
Can I second that?
We have one. All in favor? Opposed? Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, my esteemed colleague. Yes,
It's quite the capstone.
it is. Next up on the agenda, item number 5, discuss letter of intent and application grading criteria. To lead this discussion, I asked that the chairman of the Outdoor Forever Board come and give us their guidance from the board on this.
It's delegation.
Yeah, that's right. It's, we call it a punt. Thank you. So the legislation said that this process will begin with a letter of intent. And so looking at other states, primarily the states that we kind of focused in on was Georgia. That's the state that most often gets referred to, since Georgia set up $200 million, is $20 million a year for the next 10 years. We got to make sure I do the right math right. In that first year, they turned $20 million into 80 million. And that's sort of what you always see when you go there. So inside your packet, you have this rating criteria. Sorry, if anyone can't see it. It's the first one on top. That's Georgia's criteria. It simply just says matching funds, number 2, project need, number 3, recreational opportunity. So that's sort of how they viewed theirs when they were looking at it. On the back, on the back of that page is Minnesota, wildlife and fisheries conservation. Theirs is funded with lottery proceeds. And they have different buckets. They have one for the arts, one for water quality, one for wildlife, one for parks. And so we looked at the one that was more wildlife and conservation related. And so this is their rating criteria under Minnesota. And then Oregon, which is a little bit more simplified. Oregon is unique in the fact that they got $2 million guaranteed to them when they raised $1 million. So their Oregon Foundation had to go out and panhandle and raise $1 million to get access to the rest of the money. But once they finally got their proposals, these are just sort of the 6 things that they're looking at. It's listed A through F. And so I guess, Scott, I don't really know, I don't have a great amount of direction other than the fact that this is, being a qualified applicant, which means you're an NGO, some sort of city, municipality, state government, or have an affiliation with one of those, that you do something that provides clean water through conservation, supports working farms and forests, provide and improve recreational areas in urban communities, protect, restore, and enhance public and private lands and waters, and improve fish and wildlife habitat. That's sort of the criteria that the bill spells out. So I'll answer specific questions, but that's sort of
Somebody have any questions for the chairman? Was it the expectation of the board that we have something final for them from this meeting?
No, sir. The hope that this meeting is yet, I think that y'all have a discussion, and if there's questions that the project selection board needs to answer, we can convene and do that. If not, maybe have a discussion and then say, okay, let's get back together after everybody had a chance to chew on this, and sort of come back. There's actually a thing called letter of intent guidance. And what it is, it looks awful lot like the Minnesota one. And, you can see the eligible applicants. This is right from the bill, is one of these five things here. Allowable projects, the project benefits, all these things came straight from the bill that was approved through legislature. And the recommendations from what did you call it, Mr. Herndon? The steering committee to the legislature for this bill. And so, so I'm not saying that this has to be the letter of intent, but if you're curious what it says in the bill about allowable projects, they're just simply listed here. And then so is the project benefits as well.
So Brian, as I'm looking at Minnesota, you said they have multiple, this is more focused on like their wildlife and fish habitat.
Yes,
What
sir.
were the other?
One is the arts.
Okay, so they have like an art program that's.
Yes, sir.
To draw down.
And one is specific to like urban parks.
Okay,
One is for clean water projects. And then there was one more. I'm not sure, Adam.
okay, no, that's
Yeah.
fine. I was just curious. And I think the letter of intent guidance is great. The only thing I just like really quickly on the first one is the non-governmental organizations. We need to make sure that that within here, I think we should add something about like a space for the government agency that they're working in coordination with, you know, and what the nature of that is, that relationship. That was it.
Any other discussion over the letter of intent guidance?
So the letter of intent guidance, this is how we're gonna review the letters of intent. I don't suppose we have an example letter of intent from another state or something like that. That we can take a look at.
I don't, I could try to retrieve you one if you'd like.
Just be curious to see, and maybe kind of see how it fits with the guidance. We had one from Minnesota, for example. I think it'd be
Yes.
good just to kind of look at that and then compare how that fits with this draft. This draft that Brian put together, it's really nice. We want to look at the application grading criteria on the back.
Eventually, I think that the idea is that I guess you start with the letter of intent to get an idea on who would you like to get further information on. So I know that a lot of the infrastructure grants that are going on right now that we're working with Mr. Jackson, right, the governor's office, they're having a letter of intent, like the CPRA just did the Miller property at Rockefeller. So we just recently got an email from Greg Grandy saying, hey, the first round has been approved, your letter of intent's been approved, now you're allowed to apply. And I guess I would steer the committee on is, just because you're applied doesn't mean you're guaranteed. It just means that you've met the criteria of what y'all are looking for. And so just checking a box of this, I don't know. That's up to y'all on what specifically you're looking for. I know one of the questions was, what is conservation? I don't know if y'all want to define what is conservation to help define what you're looking for in your letter of intent as well.
I think we have to, as we discussed last time. I mean, you could really have application for almost anything under this. And so we really want to narrow down what's important to everybody, and especially this to do that. So we discussed at the selection board, conservation was one, what that means, what do we talk about when we talk about enhancing working lands, and some little more definition around some of those.
Won't a lot of that come out during the grading process? I
Well,
mean,
I think we need to be.
are we trying to tell them?
Yes,
what
I
we're
think we
looking
need to be as clear as we can to the folks that are going to apply for a couple reasons. One, expectation management a little bit, and so they don't waste their time. And two is, again, so we don't flood the agency or whoever, or this group and the selection board with, 1,000, 2,000 potentially eligible sort of things.
Yeah, I think it also goes towards the transparency and the fairness in the competitive process also. So.
That raises a question I have, or two questions. One is, I did additional plan affiliations. So is this the limit of the plans that are sufficient for that affiliation, or could there be other plans? A stormwater management plan, for example, or something like that.
I think that when the project selection board met, that we identified some that were not in here, like the state recreational plan that Lieutenant Governor's office has, regional watershed management, or well, that's on here, but something, yeah, I think that it was recognized that that this wasn't exhaustive, that the list wasn't
Okay,
exhaustive.
okay.
And I mean, I think to that point too, like, this is getting into scoring, but like point possibility, are we gonna cap that at some point? Are you part of the wildlife management plan? Are you part of the WMA master plan? Are you part of the, are you gonna be able to rack up a whole bunch of extra? It just, I don't,
That's
I
a
don't
good
know.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be capped up. I think so.
And
Otherwise, you can
wasn't there
easily exceed.
discussion about instead of listing all the plans, you would say cannot
Right.
contradict?
Right,
any
so
one
it
of
was,
the-
so obviously, just speaking for me with the coastal master plan is the geography. I know we said we can't do coastal anyway, but it's the geography. And so inconsistent would be bad, but consistent would be hard if it's something in Bossier on there, but certainly want to rule that out. I know we did have a discussion on whether or not we should potentially hire something that did move a project in one of those plans forward versus just not, inconsistent with the plan on there. So that's something we'll have to address if there's a score on that, or we just make it a sort of binary note that doesn't hinder any of the plans, so it's good to go versus it moves something forward.
Before we move off of deliverables, is there any other definitions we need to entertain for next time? We have conservation.
I think working lands and family farm, I think we're looking to find those also. And I think we all kind of have an idea, but for fairness in the competitive process, I think it would be good to have that kind of reduced to writing.
Joey? Mr. Chairman, if I may, at least give you a few pointers to consider now as far as definition of working lands and family farms. Again, I think the intention there, and Representative Zerang made this point during the project selection meeting last week, or whenever we did meet recently, that the emphasis there, even there, should be on the natural resource enhancements or conservation of the natural resources on those properties rather than the lands themselves. And I think, again, the emphasis there is just not to deny working lands and family farms the opportunities to participate in this. In other words, getting conservation practices on there. As we all know, them getting back to the old, the NRCS conservation standards that are typical of those areas, whether it's winter water holding, field borders, things like that, that can provide habitat, water quality, and such benefits that extend off that actual tract. But as far as giving definition to those, or what the intentions are regarding those properties within this concept, I would be glad to draft something up for the board's consideration beyond what I just told you, if that helps.
Yeah, I think that might be useful.
Okay, can do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other definitions?
Yes, conservation benefits. So is that going to be something that maybe there are pros and cons, the pros outweigh the cons? Will there be a metric as to measuring benefits, or how will that be determined? Some things may benefit, say, water quality in one way, but hurt it in another way. I'm just curious if that's something we're going to delve into, or we could use the NRCS practice guide for some of those. They have a scoring for every practice, how it helps water quality, nutrients, bacteria, sediment, for example, or if it hurts it, but that's just for practices on farms. I don't know. It's just something to consider. What's a metric or what's a benefit?
Well, I think some of this is going to have to be worked out as we discuss these individual applications. I don't know that we can be prepared for every individual occurrence, but
I guess Brian, I think this might be a question for you, but we have two tasks, right? We have letter of guidance and we have scoring criteria. From an administrative procedures point of view, we might need the lawyer down here, but do we have to, before the letter, do we have to promulgate rules? Are we having to publish stuff before this letter of intent is going out? Can we do a letter of intent and then continue to work on scoring criteria? Or are you looking to us to try to run those two concurrent? Can you kind of walk me through the timeline of what you're thinking? And you don't have to use dates, but just generally this, then this. Or
No, you're correct. Thank you, Adam. It's that everything through this board or through the project selection board has to go through the APA process. So it has to be sort of a notice of intent, has to be approved, posted for 90 days, receive public comment, and go to final rule, and finally posted. So if the first criteria that is laid out in the legislation is a letter of intent, and that's the first thing that we need to get into that APA process and get that ball moving. So if we can define a letter of intent and get that, what y'all are looking for, what do y'all need to see? And that's a great question you asked about the conservation benefits. And it's like, because that's really a decision. Y'all are gonna have these discussions during the grading and on that, but getting that done first, Adam, because we can do the APA things in segments. We can do, here's our letter of intent. We can get that out there, then people can start submitting those. And while that 90 days is going on, we can start working on that sort of the application. I know they're gonna be correlated, right? Your application can't be too far from your letter of intent, but we can do it separate like that. I do want to say one thing while I'm up here, but this guidance was just supposed to be that guidance. You're not married to anything on here. In fact, someone told me if you provide that, they're gonna just look at it and say, okay, it's already. No, that's just that. You can destroy it. You can make fun of it. You can whatever you want to do with it. It's just something to get the conversation going. So anyway, that's one issue.
I didn't know we could make fun of it. Okay.
Just repercussions in there. Just to bring us back, I think you're right. I think that's going to be good, bad, or other on the technical committee here to try and apply best practices, best available things we're all familiar with. And if not, we'll have to maybe outsource a little bit to say with, past the straight face test, yes, this potential project is going to in fact result in some benefit. Yeah.
And I'll point to the act again, that the selection of the project board shall be used to find criteria and scoring based on clear, defensible, science-based processes. Right. So we are going to have to say, this is the metrics that we're using.
I know one of the ones I was looking at, I don't know which state, but they talked about area of benefit and acreage, but I guess we can consider that when we're getting to the score sheet part, the application scoring, as opposed to the letter of intent, if you want to get that out first. Just work on this.
It's challenging. We have something similar, and of course, the initial benefits are going to come from the applicants, listed on there. And so somebody might say 20 acres, somebody might say 2,000 acres for the same project. But
and a linear
right.
project would be different than a
right.
So acreage.
So that's just
Okay.
that's one of the things, like Adam says. I mean, we have to make sure we use whatever standard practices and best practices in each of our agencies and others. So. Okay. But for the letter of intent, I think if we were sitting talking about maybe working on the scoring a little different, obviously the letter of intent has to be where the rubber hits the road, yay or nay on these things, not necessarily shades, but does it have this, does it have that? I know we talked before at the selection about match, and of course, yes, the answer is yes, but it's being up clear to the public, and that's a discussion here on, is there a required level? Does that level have to be certain types of funding, or can it be in kind? So, my vote would be all of those, whether it's state, federal, surplus, in kind, private, doesn't really matter. The whole idea here is to put these projects on the ground and leverage these funds, especially to move those projects that maybe folks can't get a cash match for, but can I think I used the example, but can have 50 volunteers, they're ready to plant something or ready to, cut some rows or something like that. So I would say, the table's good. We need that table, but then just some probably a little flushed out information on each one on there. So yes, it match, and that way you don't get 1,000 questions on, can I use this dollar? Can I use that dollar? Can it be in kind? Can it be human capital? All those.
So with this initial document, we need to determine eligibility
Right.
and then some tangibles to where you can move to the next round.
Yeah, I like the table. I mean, I don't want to be seen as this group just going with what was handed to us, but I kind of like the table.
I think, yeah, I like it too. And I think like the first two, eligible applicant. So that's obviously right out of the way. Let's get that out of the way. Which one of these are you? And then an allowable project. So which one of these do you think it falls under? And it could be more than one, right? It could be a working farm that has a water quality project, water quality improvement, right? And a historic property. I think for the project benefits, that might be where we want to get a little bit more into the narrative. So leverage it of outside funding, right? Describe the nature of it, what you're anticipating. If you can put dollars to it, put dollars to it. If you give me a $500,000 grant, then I can anticipate this, or I can anticipate this. And kind of the same type of growing the economy or enhancing working lands, what would increase public benefits, right? So like, are we funding a boat launch on the Bonnie Carey Spillway, or are we funding, acquisition of 5,000 more acres of WMA adjacent to Bonnie Carey? And what's maybe describing the need in that community? They don't need a boat launch, or they do, they have this large WMA that we're trying to preserve this one part of and provide more access. So I think maybe for project benefits is an area where we could allow a little bit more of a description, I don't want anyone to have to get into writing, a novel, but I think a little bit more narrative there might be good.
I think that's fair. We discussed maybe the importance of this with shovel ready, or at least near shovel ready projects. So we would hope that the applicant would have a decent amount of information rather that because obviously on a letter of guidance, we're going to have to put some sort of page limit on these things, and it's going to be a handful, not 70. So Adam, I think that's good. We'll allow a little bit to show what kind of thought, what kind of work has gone into the project before to do that. And then that helps us along the way on seeing, okay, are we really going to have to step out too far on trying to find benefits on this, or did they do a good job of it already? Especially when we see it, if it makes it to application.
Would the intent of this be able to fund an engineering and design and that sort of, or is it more about the implementation of on the ground projects?
I think that's a discussion. I know I had mentioned that the last time that it's hard when you get into engineering and design because that's not any kind of given on there, and it can be quite expensive. And a lot of times you can find folks to use that as match. So if there's no match, or if there's insignificant match, we just spent some money on the engineering and design that somebody's got to go out and then shake the trees for more money to build. So my suggestion would be try to minimize that or even exclude, but really shovel ready as much as we can define, speaking of terms to define, but something like that.
So in the letter of intent, we could even put in completion date. And, how long is it going to take you to get this out the door? And that way you kind of get an idea.
Maybe we should look at this from the perspective of trying to issue some sort of request for proposals or request for a letter of intent, and kind of provide some guidance and some sort of publication, maybe posting on the website, maybe mailing to well-known conservation organizations, providing sort of a request for this and what we're going to request be included in their letter of intent, so that everybody has kind of the same guidance to turn in a competitive letter of intent that's going to be subject to the same criteria and grading. Are we thinking about doing something like putting out a request for proposals or something of that sort?
That's
sort of what the
Yeah.
APA process would be.
The APA process would be that.
this is what we're looking for.
Yeah. I don't know if many people are watching the APA though. You kind of want something, some kind of more, public outreach sort of.
Well, that would be the hope of these two meetings, but
And I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
comes down, that's a little farther down the road, but yeah, I think, I was gonna mention it a little later in the agenda, but I would definitely like the board to start thinking about outreach. We had briefly talked about, since we are looking at governmental organizations, making sure we are canvassing the associations for police juries, parish councils, share whatever we have out there, to where once we have documents ready to go, that we can hit all those with a little fact sheet and say, here's what's coming out, just in case you don't follow with the state register.
No, and that's exactly, he said it, so I don't have to, but yeah, the APA is going to define what the RFP is. And we'll do an outreach. We have a roundtable. It's going to happen October 14th. It should hopefully have about 300 people attend. We're going to talk about this, and I'd love to have, hey, here's your criteria. Go to this website. You can see this. And then I know, talking to the division administration, there's an association of police jurors we're going to plan on reaching out to, or like you said, sheriffs, or just different entities that are out there to try to educate them once we have it. Because the best thing we can have is a bunch of applications to look at. So when we go to the legislature in the future, it's not just, hey, there's 5 out here. If we had another $3 million, we can fund them all. It's, hey, there's a real need for this, and hopefully this shows that demand.
Right.
But Mr. Herndon with the Conservation Fund does these types of projects all the time. Do you have any sort of criteria that you're used to when you're doing these?
Well, I think you're on the verge of defining that right now. I mean, you've got that list that you're looking at, but those basically the criteria, taking the law itself and reflecting that into a table like you're looking at, that scoring table, and defining, okay, what range of numbers are we looking at for each attribute, and then the details are going to have to be tackled at individual meetings. But I think just having an announcement based on the criteria that are sort of already set forth in the law and around public benefits through conservation. I mean, we can provide some more input into what you define, but I think the pieces are there, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Ray, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, because I'm looking at my homework here, project selection board recommendations, and towards the end, it's defined conservation. As you all are looking, Conservation Fund is looking at doing projects. How are y'all defining conservation?
Well, so when I hear that term, my immediate thought is permanent protection.
Right. My thoughts, restrictions on use and alienation, essentially.
Restrictions on use, but through that permanent protection, there's going to be other, tangential benefits, which are the public benefits we're talking about. That could be, again, a public use. It could be just, access, paddling, or access for birding, or access for hunting and fishing. It could be the water quality benefits that we kind of touched on, or it could be the working farm that is producing rice, where you have hundreds of thousands of waterfowl that benefit from that action. And in addition, economic benefit to the community of continuing to produce rice. So those kind of that level of attribute sort of below that permanent protection label that I just threw out is kind of what we would anticipate. And a lot of these, I mentioned earlier, the federal sources of funds that are out there, those come with sort of directives, if you will, what they're trying to accomplish. So we want to take that law, make sure we're abiding by that law, have some criteria that are sort of laid out for the public benefits, what those actually are, and how does any given project fit into those various public benefits. And then look at these, these leverage opportunities to say, are we meeting the same objectives or similar objectives, or are we, feeling like this is a wise use of tax dollars, And if so, then, maybe that's a very competitive project.
I wonder if we could get somebody to send us a link to the federal laws that you're referring to that govern the administration of the grant programs for this, that kind of have the directives and, kind of just to guide us and make sure that we're fitting into what sort of rules they have for this funding.
Well, there are many.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not just one.
Yeah, no, it's not just
Yeah.
one. And I would suggest that, you've got the law that kind of lays it out. And you've kind of got the ingredients that you know about where are the wildlife benefits.
Mhm.
That's the ultimate objective of the project.
Mhm.
Where are the people benefits? The citizens of Louisiana. Where are the economic benefits? You can break it down that roughly and kind of, I think, achieve the objectives that were set out by the law.
I'll note we kind of have conservation benefits. I mean, a definition of sorts in blue on the bottom of the points page. So we have a cap at 400 points, and we have conservation benefits as improving water quality, increasing public use, public access, economic development, enhancing land, enhancing wildlife. I think enhancing land, you would think about soils, right? Think about, when you're thinking of working land, it makes me think of only two things that would be suitable for something like a conservation project, and that's a farmland or timberland. Did you have something to add?
I guess I could have clarified that better in my earlier comment, but working lands, anything that's deriving an agronomic revenue or practice off a given landscape, whether that's cropland, timberland, grazing land, anything, or anything that fits within that realm. And it can be a lot of things. And another thing to keep in mind is that in many cases where an actual revenue may not be generated from the livestock on a particular grazing land, grazing is the biomimicry tool used to maintain the grassland ecotype that may be the conservation focus of that easement. And what happens to those livestock down the road, well, that's another thing and somebody else's current concern, but possibly not that landowner's. To that end, I'll venture that within the working land landscape, which is where I come from, with the strong conservation mindset, what conservation means in my world is not so much preservation as it is planned use of the resource without its depletion or degradation, but rather its enhancement while you're generating something from it. And again, that may seem a little bit loose, but thinking of working lands, it could even be the tidal wetland landscape. If you look at Lower Cameron and Vermilion, for instance, that is a working landscape in that local ecology and within that culture, as well as the Bitnap area. So the same can be said there, not just your typical grazing, cropland, or timber production. There's a lot of interpretation and a broad definition for a working landscape.
Yeah, the tidelands is a great
I
example.
didn't want to make it more complex for you, but just to let you know that it's not as straightforward as row crop, timber, cows.
Yeah.
And when you do see those things on it, much as was alluded to in a rice agricultural landscape, when you take the rice agriculture away from what had been previously a native grassland biome, what you get after you take the rice away is probably going to be something drastically different than what it has been recently and what it had been before, neither of which will be productive from a conservation mindset. And I guess it's all about maintaining those land uses, ecotypes, by whatever measures it may take. And sometimes that includes what would traditionally be seen as a type of agriculture. And getting back to conservation benefits and what is agriculture, it seems clunky, but again, to stay within the guidelines of a scientific basis is to look at NRCS's Field Office Technical Guide and what's in there and what went into the development of those conservation practice standards. And I think that'll answer a lot of questions. And if I was to venture a suggestion as to which federal program to look into, to give yourself some ideas while you go through this process, there's been many, as Mr. Herndon said, but keeping in mind that part of the focus of this program is to harness as many federal dollars as possible with these state buckets of funds. The most recent, one of the more recent ones being the RCPP, Regional Conservation Partnership Program, and with its stated intention being of leveraging the greatest amount of partnership resources for the federal dollar as possible. Basically, looking at what you're looking at from the opposite side of the spectrum. Here's our limited amount of federal dollars. How can we leverage the most conservation bang for the buck with this? And there's some really good examples. One of which is what I'll call the Rice Stewardship Program. And it's a broad partnership between USA Rice, Ducks Unlimited, NRCS providing the federal funds, conservation districts and farmers, landowners contributing a in-kind match by virtue of their time and their equipment in installing these conservation practices that have to be spot checked and approved for adherence to that NRCS standard by someone who's trained to do that. And it's big. It's really big. A lot of dollars being leveraged into the various RCPP projects across the nation. And I think that would be some project guidance that would be worth it.
I'll definitely take a look.
All right, any other discussion on the letter of intent?
I would just suggest when we do issue the letter of intent, maybe we hold the grading criteria and work on some of these numbers.
And definitely, as you develop your version of the letter of intent, you know, have in the back of your mind your criteria, so that kind of one leads to the other. Okay, look at the numbers. Are you all ready to move on to Jim?
So we're at 5 right now?
Number 6?
Yeah, well, yeah, number 5. No, I'm good with that.
So, what's it, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
So the intent here is, obviously, we talked about all those, would be to basically, I'm asking you, you're in the same spot I am, but gather input for the, I know you just got instantly wise when we voted you chairperson, but
I think I'm on target too.
but gather information, get a little more, shop that around, come back to our next meeting of this group, hopefully in advance of the late October, to really get these things tightened up, right?
Yeah, correct. I have on deliverables, come up with our definitions, flesh out the letter of intent in your own form or fashion, and then we get back together our next meeting and try and come out with a cohesive request. Anybody see that differently? Okay. Moving which leads to number 6, review the timeline. We need to decide upon LOI and grading criteria before the next project selection board meeting.
That was the original hope, but if, again, I think 15 minutes ago, we kind of changed it to where if we can just get moving with the letter of intent, that can get the ball moving forward. So if y'all want to talk about grading criteria, you're welcome to, but the main thing is the letter of intent, since that's the first step in this process.
I think that definitely should be our deliverable. But as I would say, as I'm walking through the letter of intent, I'm going to be thinking grading criteria. So as we do that, I would encourage everybody just on the side, have your grading criteria that you're creating as you go. And that way, you know, if our next meeting, we can do both, we'll do both. But our main intent is to get the letter of intent out.
I'm a little confused on the letter of intent. Is this something that we're going to draft and issue, or I mean, the letter of intent guidance seems like it's letters of intent will be received by us.
Yes.
From the potential applicants.
Yes, sir. So what I imagine is we have a website for this. And so that website's going to say, were you interested in the application? And they click on it and it says, qualifying entities, you must be one of these or work in partnership with one of these.
Okay.
And then these are the types of projects y'all are looking for. These are the types of benefits that you're seeking. And then that bottom of the page, if y'all wanted to have something along those lines as, make sure you have the total project amount, including in-kind, E&D. Do y'all want to include that as part of a total project when you view it, or do you not? Make sure how much you asking for, what's the total project? If y'all want to define what kind of in-kind, if y'all want to have, like, that's sort of what you need to come up with the letter of intent. So that way, when they write their 1 to 2 to 3 page, however, whatever y'all say the limitation is, they could say, we're trying to purchase a property in this area. We feel it has a wildlife benefit for this, this, and this, that it's going to provide water quality improvement here and here, or it does this. And just say, total project is 800,000. We're seeking 150,000 to match. We're also looking for additional funding through blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And they could just write a letter to y'all that y'all could go through and just say, does this check the boxes? Is it, is it told me everything I need to know?
So our deliverable is going to be a request for letters of intent.
Yes, sir.
Well, and if I don't think it would be too hard to do, and because I'm throwing this out there, I'll volunteer myself as well, though, but to provide a template for everyone to use, kind of a rough outline on there. That way, everybody who has to sit and do those things will know they're all common points. And that should be something pretty easy to put on the web when folks look under the project. That way, if you miss it, it was clearly spelled out what those sections should have been. And hopefully we can get you to see them a little better like that rather than all over the board. So I'll donate something like that as well when I come with suggestions.
And so the hope is that y'all, get 20 letters of intent in. You say, okay, well, these 15 meet all the stuff that we're looking for. Then we email those back and say, hey, you made it through the first round. Please submit, an application. And then that application is going to be more specific. And y'all may require a maintenance plan on the application, that how's this thing going to be, into the future? How long is this going to be, and how you're going to fund, the benefits of that? Or you may have other requirements of the application that may not be spelled out on, specifically on the letters of intent. And so that's sort of that second thing, is that grading criteria of that application. Right. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
So one more question, sorry. We're going to review letters of intent first and then decide which ones we're going to request applications from.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm thinking of past experience where letters of intent have been numbered in the thousands rather than the hundreds. So as specific as we can get, the better.
I'm with you.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That's the conversation me and Mr. Louiana had upstairs about an hour ago.
Yeah.
Is if you're too general, you're gonna end up with a whole bunch. And if you're too specific, you're gonna take out a lot of applicants that could maybe benefit or apply, or so it's a
I wonder if there's two main categories that you could look at. You're looking at, one is just acquisitions, and then the other is actual projects. There's going to be a whole lot more vetting associated with actual projects as opposed to just like a conservation easement acquisition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think you could also, again, you could delve into that when you start to score them out. If we're looking at letter of intent first, I don't think that you want to parse out that.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All right, so we need to meet to discuss our deliverables and prepare this and adopt this LOI and possible grading criteria prior to the October 20th next meeting of the project selection board. Do you all think we can do that in one meeting? It's unanimous.
Yeah, I think especially if we, can move some things around the group by email and others, and we can maybe do that as we go to get where everybody is rather than coming in cold. I'd appreciate that.
Can we do that?
Is that allowed?
But,
You can share information. You can't make it.
Right.
I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah. Where's Cole when you?
yeah.
That's true.
I would think that you can provide, we can provide discussion and information via email. We just can't we can't have a quorum, we can't take a poll, we can't, as I appreciate it, again, I'm not an attorney. And
I'll
I'm
get
in
a-
no way speaking in my official capacity, but I would think that we would be free to share working documents and discuss them and share concerns or feedback, notes, as long as the discussion is had and any voting or polling and conversations about that in public, in a public forum.
And we can touch base with Cole and get a.
We
ruling on
can, and
that.
we can
We'll send
also
something
sit there, if y'all submit amongst the group, like Wildlife creates their own example, and they send it to the group and say, this is what we're thinking, and then Department of Ag says, okay, we like, this is what we're thinking.
Right.
We could also provide that as a packet. and
Right, that's-
Include that at the next meeting, so it will be in the minutes, and it'll be a public document, it'll be available. As
So
long
if
as
we-
y'all don't have discussions, oh, I like this, I don't like this, just everyone providing their insight.
Right, I think if we could then, set a meeting date and then sometime before that, have our due outs delivered and then can be included sometime before that meeting as a part of the packet, then that would be awesome. Yeah, just something so we all know what, what we're each thinking on there, things to move forward would be a lot better than just sitting here quietly and spending a lot of time looking over everybody's homework and then getting rolling. So.
Okay, so 2 weeks.
I think that 2 weeks from now gives you,
Yeah.
what is it, that's the 20th, right?
Yeah.
And then that gives you a full month. And so if we come back in and we say, oh, we struggled at the September 20th meeting, we have time to have another meeting if need be before the October 20th selection committee meeting.
19th or the 21st is best for me, but I can force the 20th if need be.
19th, me on that one.
I don't have any signal.
We do that on purpose.
I'm gonna have to confirm the date. I believe, not next week, the week after, I've got trial results.
We can try the 19th. Everyone want to try that day? We'll put that down tentatively.
Yep.
All right. All in favor of the 19th?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. We'll get back here, same time, same place on the 19th, unless we have a conflict. Any other discussion? Any public comment? Yes.
I do want to share with y'all that the week after the 19th, I'm going to be at the CBMA conference. It's the Conservation Business Managers Association. It's where I learned a lot of these different grant programs last year. So if there's a specific question that you have on how this state does this or how this state does that, on that date, if you give me those questions, I will come back and email all y'all those answers. So anyway, if you come across a question when you're going through your thing, you're just like, well, I'm curious how, they handled this, write it down and I'll be like, I'm gonna offer that.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Who in a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.